Hey guys, welcome back. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Ancient Health Podcast. Today, I'm going to tell you, it's the Blonde Squad. I have a beautiful guest, a beautiful guest in the house that you may know because she's just popping up everywhere in the natural health space amongst young women. And she's really bringing a light to the conversation of women's health, especially when it comes to biohacking. And I love her story because the journey in her getting there really was birthed from her experiencing a lot of her own health struggles, which many of our guests and a lot of our experts that we interview have a similar story too. But I am so excited to bring in Aggie Lal. She is the biohacking bestie. If you listen to her on her podcast, she has an incredible new book we're going to talk about, but she's a public figure. She's renowned in the space of biohacking, and that's really what she's known for. So if you're a female, especially, you're going to love this conversation because, you know, I always like to expose the edges, like the stuff that's new and upcoming that can really improve your health. We live in such a fast-paced world, and I believe that we've got some excellent tools and resources, but how we implement them as females is different than how men can utilize some of these. And Aggie's the woman, y'all. She has really brought a voice to this. So thank you, Aggie, for leading the charge for all the ladies and helping us understand what biohacking can look like for our lives. So thank you for joining us on the show. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for being my hype woman. I'm like, wow, that was so sweet. I appreciate it. And I think this is like the new paradigm culturally, you know, like 10 or 20 years ago, women were more competitive. You know, we were just competing against each other. And now we're like, hey, let's just make some room for ourselves, you know, whether it's in biohacking, whether it's in business. And we realize how good it feels to support another sister, whether it's in health or in business. And I think we're waking up to this. We are demanding to be treated seriously. And I think it comes down to us not treating ourselves seriously a little bit, you know, because feeling less than men or trying to follow, a fitness regimen for men. And, you know, I even catch myself doing that. Like yesterday, so a couple of biohackers, we had another interview. It's like, yeah, I've been fasting for 9 days. And there's a part of me, I'm like, fuck. Dang, I'm not doing that. And they was like, oh, that's right. Because I'm a woman, it wouldn't work for me. I'll lose my period. That's how, Aggie, it's okay. It's okay. But like the old me a few years ago, when I got into biohacking, you're doing 9 days. I'm doing 21, which I did because I was like, you know, I'm not weak. And then I'm like, yeah, no, we're different. So I can't fast as much as him, especially, you know, depending where I am in my cycle. So I think it was just this beautiful lesson that I stopped wanting to be a less hairy version of men. And we all kind of do because we are treated that way. And then we feel like something's wrong with us because we can't fast as much or we lose our period or we can't lose weight. That's the number one thing that we get. You know, oh, I can't lose weight because X, Y, and Z. And then you realize, that's okay. I just need to lose weight differently.
So true. No, I can appreciate that because I think that you're right. There is a culture where we feel like more is always better and we just need to hustle harder. If you're not getting results, then you're not putting in enough effort. And we have to rewrite the narrative because that's ultimately not how female bodies are designed. In fact, if we don't understand that we operate on rhythms, then we're going to end up forcing ourselves into something that is biologically unnatural. So it's, you will essentially end up working against yourself to the point where you create more problems than you had when you started. So I would actually love to just have you take us on that journey because I imagine that you discovered that when you were traveling, doing your blog and realized maybe some of the choices, the lifestyle or the environment, different things that I'm exposed to are really starting to create a barrier to me feeling my best. So maybe just bring us on that journey because I know that in that experience, that's really where you learned the lessons. That's where you started to question the narrative and find solutions that worked for you.
100%. And I think it's so beautiful because, you know, travel obviously just opens your mind to this idea that, you know, we in the Western world get everything right. But then the highest rates of depression, the highest rates of burnout, you know, the highest rates of obesity. So clearly, maybe we're not like exactly nailing this thing called life, especially for women. And I personally don't know a ton of women that are just let themselves be. Because even if you're a stay-at-home mom, which A, is not celebrated and you're being, you know, looked down upon, and I am yet to find a woman who would like proudly say she's a stay-at-home mom. Because every time I go to a party, she's like, they kind of like close down. They're like, yeah, I'm a stay-at-home mom, like as if like embarrassed or like I have nothing going on, instead of like, hey, I'm doing the most important job for the society. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I am yet to find a woman who has enough space in her life that she fully can surrender to the present moment from a place of like I have space. I can let myself the feminine flow, you know, especially in the Western world. And we fill our days, and especially when you become a mom, your days are even busier because you're now juggling work and career and kids and your home, you know, and we're so good at overachieving at everything, right? So we're like going to have the most cleaned up place. And, you know, I'm guilty of that as well. We always feel like we need to get everything right, being the best moms, having the nicest home. And, you know, I haven't hung any art in my home like for the longest time. And I'm like, well, I'm not I feel bad about myself. Oh, I don't have time to nest, and I don't have time for my career. I don't have time for this. And so we're really, really hard on ourselves. And I'm realizing in my journey that I just don't want to buy into this narrative anymore. So dove deeper, and, you know, science discovered that women operate different than men. And I feel like if I show the studies to my grandma, she's like, yeah, I've been trying to tell you this for the last 20 or 30 years. Because, you know, like older cultures, and especially, you know, I live between Los Angeles and Bali in Indonesia. So we have a house there. We spent 6 months in Bali, 6 months in LA. And I don't need to convince anybody with any studies that if you do less, like less is more, and more intentional action from a place of rest will have a better impact on your life than chasing, you know, because if chasing work, every woman would be a billionaire, but that's not exactly the case, right? So like just being more intentional, prioritizing rest, and understanding that we're different than men has been life-changing, yet a journey. So
yes. Yeah. Oh man. Okay. I have to ask this because I feel like this is going to be so valuable. This may set some woman free because you've achieved a high level of success. I would imagine that many people, if they looked at where you are now, on the opportunities that you've had and how you flourished in so many ways. And you mentioned something about having downtime, having seasons, or having a period of rest. Do you believe that you can have a season of doing at the same time that you are having a season of developing? Because this is where I see women get things. They look at the mountaintop moments of everyone's life and they think, I have to be producing and doing all the time for me to feel valued, for me to feel like I'm doing as much as everybody else, because that makes me feel secure. That speaks to the insecurity in them. But what I'm interested to find out is, what are the developing seasons? What were the seasons? How did that look for you when you were facing things where you thought, I've got barriers to my growth and I want to overcome. I can see myself. I can envision it in my future.
For a second.
Were there compromises though that you had to make to protect what it is that you have on you? Like what it is that you feel like you are called to carry out in life, that you had to say no to a lot of things. What did the no's look like to you in your journey? Because this is important. If you are listening, you have to, female, male, I don't care. There are very specific times in your life where I believe you are called to rest. And in those times, if you do not yield to it, you will sacrifice your potential on the altar of production, on the altar of doing more. So what did that look like for you? Because people see you right now and they see Aggie that's a book writer, a TEDx speaker, all of this, like there's so much that you have done. But I imagine there were seasons where it wasn't all flashy. It wasn't all exposure. So what did that look like for you?
Yeah. And I think, you know, again, the brainwash that we're in, which is like constantly productive, constantly every month has to be doing better than others. And, you know, like that very much is like wounded masculine energy that we let the society brainwash us into, you know, and that's not the case. And I love that you mentioned that men are a woman, because I think there is this whole idea that like, oh, a woman podcast, you know, women speaking, like men kind of feel, a lot of men, and I'm curious how many men actually listened to this and got this far, it becomes like, oh, it's like, it's a woman thing. But like, you know, men have higher rates of suicide, and that constant productivity doesn't serve men either, you know? So yeah, like it's just sad when you look what we do to ourselves as a society, that not we think the success, that our happiness is at the end of financial success and whatnot. And then we get there and we realize that's not it, but everyone kind of wants to, experience that, and fair enough. I think there is a certain level of success that allows you to sleep well at night and not be stressed to pay your bills. But at the same time, we need to bring a different narrative. And this narrative can only be brought into the society by women, which means, hey, I don't look at my life in days or months or even years. I look at it into decades, right? So when you look at, you just mentioned that your daughter's turning 10, that's a decade. So I would love to ask you, when you reflect back on a decade, how much you have done, right? But if you looked at the first 3 months of post giving birth, you probably would feel like, oh my God, I haven't done much in my career. But if you zoom out and have a bigger picture, that wisdom of okay, this is a season, there's a season to be a mom, there's a season to come back to work, etc., etc. That's beautiful. And some of the seasons will be longer for some people and some of them will be shorter. I think what people get the most stuck about is being stuck in one season, no matter how good the season is, So yeah. Whether it's just work, and feeling like, oh my God, I've been doing the same thing for years and years and it feels like the season never ends. But there's, even on a smaller scale, our monthly cycle and how we should cycle our rest and productivity, and just kind of slow down when it comes to workout and fasting and whatnot. So.
Yeah, I would love to ask you about that. When it comes to women's cycles, what is it that you feel like is the best rhythm, for month to month?
But before that, I'm curious to see if you want to share, if you feel comfortable to reflect back on your decade. You're celebrating exact decade of your birth.
That is actually a really, I love that point that you make, because we really do get so tunnel vision into the day to day that it gets really hard if you're not intentional to step back and look at your progress. I think this is something that really points out how effective journaling can be, because you don't remember. I've just started realizing in the last several months how much I don't remember. And because
when you write the journal, it's like, of course I'll remember this.
Oh, I know. I'm like, this is pointless.
3 months later, I'm like, oh yeah, was that a big deal? I'm like, I don't remember that.
Right. But it's so critical for your growth, because so many of us have wins on the board. We are growing in ways that we don't even see because we live isolated. We live in front of our phones and we're living in somebody else's world all the time. Nobody else is seeing the day-to-day sacrifices that we're making. So nobody's really celebrating. And especially if you're a mom, maybe you're with your kids all day. And I know what it feels like to be putting out meals and, vacuuming the floors and doing all the stuff. And, everybody's just complaining. So, you're not getting a lot of times a lot of praise like, hey, mom, you're doing so great. Wow, you just look great today. Your attitude is so positive. You're not getting a lot of feedback. So if you're not intentionally writing some of these things down, you're probably missing all of the wins and the progress. And it is happening. So it's so critical to be able to step back and really look at, 10 years, like my middle child. So she turns 10 today, and I have, one that's a little bit older and then the baby. And it is wild to me to be parenting all three of them, because I got one in diapers, I got one that's a preteen, and then I've got the 10-year-old. And I can't even really remember. I remember what it was like being pregnant, because it was only, a year and a half ago I was pregnant, but I don't even remember Sadie as a baby anymore. It's just hard because I see her now at, 10 years old, and I'm like, that just seems ages and ages and ages ago. And so much does change over time. And I think it really does bring a different level of mindset and perspective when you can step back and appreciate. And you can honestly look at all of the things you've overcome too, because a lot of us walk through some deep, dark, hard seasons, and you can think, wow, look at what I overcame. Look how great, look at how much. We think that just getting older just means breakdown, breakdown in your body, breakdown in your mind, maybe breakdown in your finances, relationships. How many times do we see it where people start to lose their peace? They start to feel stressed out, anxiety, it's like their zest for life and their passion just starts to wane over the years, not to mention the physical breakdown of the body. But when you can really look and see, man, I went through all of that and look, I'm still here. Look at look at my body's actually more resilient than it's ever been.
Yeah.
I think you bring up such a good point because many of us are we're just too busy, right? We don't take that time to do that. So that's an incredible tool. I mean, we're talking about biohacking.
Yeah, no, and I think the two things that, again, number one, instead of outsourcing all the praises and hoping that, your family would appreciate your kids or whatever, learn to insource those praises and just giving yourself a good pat on the back every day and just seeing like, well, I did this, not from a place of like, oh, we often linked our, self-worth to productivity and you feel like, oh, I've done so many things, but more so like, oh, wow, I was present. Oh, I didn't, I did so much better than the other day when that person didn't trigger me. And just reflecting on that and just realizing you don't want other people to, like you mentioned, like, oh, she did TikTok, TED Talk, whatever. She wrote a book. But one of the things that is the most important is like, if I attach my self-worth to all of these things, how am I going to feel on a Tuesday morning when I'm not doing a TED Talk and not receiving an award? I'm just going to feel like bored with reality, but reality is delicious. You can get turned on by reality if you realize like, wow, folding the socks. Like I was doing this exercise yesterday, which is like, I'm going to fold my fiance's socks for 20 minutes and find the juiciness in that, because that's real life. That's what happens almost every day. And instead of just feeling like, babe, how on earth can you, have your socks in every single room of the house? Like this is a talent at this point, and then I realized it's actually cute, and this is him. That's one. And then second, community. I think what I mentioned at the beginning, having the right group of women. And this is not like people are like, oh, it'd be so nice. I'm like, no, like put some effort, follow someone like, like a community that you already feel like, whether it's biohacker or not, reach out, like make sure you have other women who have been mothers or don't want to be mothers, they choose to be child free and are in your sphere to support you in your journey, because otherwise, like, you're not meant to do it alone. None of this. So yeah.
Oh, I'll never fold socks the same. I'm going to be like, this is such a juicy experience. Because it's just like, it is so, the mundane can honestly, you can either make it a task and it's super mundane, or you can look at it as an opportunity to be present. And ultimately that's what it is, because your life is not just a large gap of time between the mountaintop moments. It is the day-to-day stuff. It is the day-to-day tasks that you're showing up for and how you're enjoying them and receiving them. And if you always think about it as that it's a chore, then you'll think, gosh, well, I have to go, 3 months before my next vacation, and you'll live for just the small pockets of time.
And I love that chore is also such a heavy word. And I said, oh, my household chores. I'm like, it sounds like I'm being whipped. Like, it sounds horrible. What if it's a household choice? It's my choice to do these things, and they get to do all of these things. And, there are studies, and I mentioned that in my book, that they did a study. They had cleaners in a hotel, and they said one group, did you know that cleaning the house actually makes you burn as many calories as, going for a 10-mile walk? And that's it. They just dropped that seed. And the others, they didn't say anything. So the ones that were informed that they're burning energy and calories actually end up losing quite a bit of weight, versus the other ones didn't lose weight at all. So like when you realize that it's all a workout, it's all a chance to move your body. It's all a chance. Like I have Alexa in every room, because by the time I would have music and get my phone, it's so slow. I was just like, Alexa, play my dance song. So then like she's playing and like doing something. I'm like, oh, cool. These are the tiny little opportunities for you to move your energy. And I think what the next thing in biohacking would be focusing more on the somatic. Biohackers realize like, oh, you don't need to work out every day. You don't need to spend all of these hours at the gym. Doing heavier weights less often is better. But that also doesn't mean that you have to go on super long walks or whatnot, but just moving your body throughout the day, having a standing desk, playing some music, whatever, like having my Alexa in the kitchen. And we have a relationship, because she's always like, they're like, play this, play Beyonce, like, I just want to feel like, what's the Texas song that she's been playing? Like we just dance, and I play with my dog, and just like catching those moments, because otherwise, of course, it's going to feel like like life is passing you by if you're waiting for this big holiday and another trip. And for someone who's been to over 100 countries, and I travel full time for 9 years, 300 days a year, I can tell you that the happiness is not on an island in Bora Bora, because if you're unhappy, then you're going to bring that with you, So you don't want to escape your life, you want to create those memories on every day.
That's so good. That's right. You don't want to escape your life or feel like you have to escape the responsibilities in order to enjoy your life.
Yeah.
And that's so critical. And I mean, so much about really perspective, right? I mean, it's, you can make any situation, and honestly, like it comes down to joy too, because happiness is just connected to circumstances. Like you are giving your power to the external. You're giving your power to the whether or not your kids are going to behave and cooperate in the store with you, or, whether or not there's traffic, and then you're having to sit much longer than you thought. But when you have true happiness and you're choosing, you have like this level of joy that can't be taken by anybody or any other circumstance, like that changes the reality of every experience that you have. So it's so cool that we're talking about this, because it's so important. And I see a lot of people just kind of dragging themselves through routines. And honestly, the same can be said with biohacking. I feel like what are your thoughts on a lot of these biohacking tools that women are using, and they're like, oh, they don't work. This didn't work for me. Like, what is your experience with maybe women just not being able to move the needle, and they kind of seem to be trying? Like, what is it that's not working? What do you feel like is the biggest barrier for them to seeing success?
Yeah, I love that you're asking that, because I think anyone who, even there are a lot of studies that say like calories in, calories out, calorie restriction works. And every time it's coming from a male and studies. And I'm like, have you actually worked with women? Because I know for a fact, working with 25,000 women, the calories in, calories out just doesn't work. And women are not lazy. And I would under eat, for the longest time and still put on weight. And now I'm at, over 3,000 calories a day. And I'm as fit as I could be. So for anyone listening to this and who have tried a diet and felt like they can't move the needle, I just want you to know, like, you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You're probably a woman, and there's so many factors that go into your weight loss, Number one, if you calorie restrict, there's nowhere to go from there. How long can you restrict for? If you keep going less and less and less, your body will, adapt, your metabolic rate will go down. So like, you don't want to calorie restrict. That's like one message. Number two, realizing that food is just like such a small component for a woman. We want to be safe in our bodies. When we're in fight or flight, we will constantly feel like on edge, and we can't digest, we can't absorb nutrients, our cortisol is high, we store belly fat and have puffy face. And I know a lot of, like some people call it skinny fat, which is like you're skinny everywhere else, but your belly's like all like swollen. So that would be my another thing. Third, just realizing, like what you said, that you can be biohacking to the kingdoms come, but if your mindset is that you're absolutely miserable in this, of course your body is not gonna release that weight. Fat is there to keep you safe. On many levels, keeps you safe so that your body doesn't get overloaded with insulin. Fat, whenever it doesn't feel safe, it doesn't feel like there is enough food, right? Because you're calorie restricting, it's going to hold on to that fat, because it's like, okay, well, like I want to make sure that you survive, right? Like that's your body's main job, is to make sure that you survive. So just realizing all of these things. And I think it's been really eye-opening that like if women just like work on their nervous system more so than counting calories, I feel like they would see a much better result when it comes to weight loss, especially.
Okay. So Aggie, I think that this conversation is so important and critical for women, especially coming from somebody that has made your life work about supporting women with the right tools to really up the ante on their health, like to really be able to improve some of the health outcomes that they're experiencing. And what you're saying, and what I'm taking from this conversation, is that there is you can try all the tools and strategies you want. You can split hairs. But if you don't work on your nervous system, you don't build in time to rest, like all of that effort will be meaningless. You know, it will actually probably will pose a bigger threat and become a bigger barrier for you having breakthrough. So in your book, Biohacking Like a Woman, you go through a number of different tools, and ultimately like talking about a lot of things that women are struggling with and how they can really start to improve by their lifestyle, the decisions that they're making day to day. What do you feel like is the most important thing that women get nailed down, or like the most important tool in their toolbox to be able to optimize their hormones, help them feel be metabolically efficient, but feel all the energy from it? Because a lot of women are just going through their day, just kind of dragging their feet and relying on caffeine. So what is like the one thing that they're like, they've got to master this, because if we can't get this down, then a lot of other things aren't going to be supportive.
Yeah. I would suggest sleep, even if you don't want to do anything else, nailing your sleep and making sure that it's, it's sacred, and it's not the amount of time that you stay in bed, it's the quality of the sleep, So a lot of times I hear moms like, oh, I don't have time to sleep. I'm like, yeah, that's why your sleep should be efficient. Are you wearing red light glasses, and do you, minimize screen time? And usually people just like have a light, because they have a baby. So they have a light in the evening, and they sit on their phone at 3 a.m. when they're breastfeeding. I'm like, oh, no wonder your sleep is bad, So it's just like it's free. It's like, it's a no-brainer. So that would be my number one. But when it comes to nutrition, which I'm a little bit more passionate about, I would say, like, don't change your diet. And in the book, I was like, just change the timing. Timing is almost more important than what you eat, according to studies. So 3 things I would just say. Absolutely change nothing about your diet. It doesn't really matter. What you will change is making sure that you have 3 meals a day, not more. We want to make sure that your gut gets a little bit of a rest. And so having these micro fasts would be really good. Number 2, fast according to your cycle, so like making sure that your eating window is 8 to 10 hours, ideally, or even shorter if you can push yourself around your ovulation to be a little longer. But ultimately, you don't want to have a 9 p.m. dinner and, put coffee in your mouth at 6 a.m. first thing in the morning, just giving your body a little bit of a break would be ideal. And then eating food in the right order. So like, okay, I know a lot of people feel very passionate about their food choices. So if you tell them, hey, can't have oatmeal in the morning and, not enough carbs, I know they would get really upset. What I say to people, okay, if whatever you have, make sure you have fiber first, right? So that some vegetables at the beginning, then protein and fat, and then you can have your carbs and all the oatmeal and all the things that are not exactly, biohacking approved, and they've quite a lot of sugar. And I would just make sure that the protein is like you have a protein centered diet. So at least 100 grams of protein. I think that's just like an absolute minimum. Most women, you want to have a gram per pound. So like if you're 150 pounds, you want to have 150 grams of protein. If we're having 3 meals a day, it's about 50 grams of protein. And a lot of women would be like, oh, what does it even mean? That means 3 eggs and a chicken breast or a steak or whatever. And that is a lot of food. And a lot of women get scared. I'm like, oh my God, I can't eat so much because I'm going to lose, put on weight. I'm like, have that. And then you can, once you actually assume that, like, I want to make sure that I have enough protein and everything else is a premium. And as long as you hit your protein, you'll realize that you're not as hungry for the hot chocolate and the double, salted caramel maca, whatever you can get at Starbucks. And like, if you start your day like with sugar, obviously it sets you up for glucose spikes, for cravings and whatnot. So I know breakfast can be boring, but like making sure that you start with protein and fiber is really life-changing.
Yeah, that's so true. We talk about protein all the time. Like, we're always hammering the ladies, like, you're probably under eating protein. If you think that you're getting enough, you don't need to count macros. You don't need to count it all the time, but just do it like once, because you'll probably surprise yourself. I even did that too last summer. I was like, okay, I'm going to take a week and I'm just going to track some macros. And I thought I was getting enough carbs. I thought I was getting enough protein, and I was like way underdoing it. And I'm like, I feel like,
And
Yeah.
even if you're aware of that, like, I struggle to eat enough protein for myself, because the thing is, you not even eat protein for your, you eat protein for your ideal body weight. So for me, like, I should be eating a little bit more in a way, because I want to build muscle. Muscle is heavier. And I think that's number one thing in biohacking. It's just, you don't want to weigh yourself. Like, it creates this weird relationship with the body, that you have a number that you think you should be weighing at. And then I'm way heavier than I was when I was, chubby. I'm now almost 116 pounds. I used to be 89 as well. There's a big gap, but like, all that muscle actually weighs a lot, And so if I was looking at the weight, I would think, oh my God, I'm doing something wrong. But I know that weight is actually just like muscle, and muscles are metabolically active. I don't know, it sounds really scary, but basically they burn calories. Fat doesn't burn calories. Muscles do. So like, the more muscle you have, the more you can get away with things, but you need to feed those muscles as much as possible.
Yep. I mean, muscle is expensive, guys. On your body, that is calorically expensive. And you want to create habits that spare muscle, because we know that as you age, you will start to lose. Many women start to break down and they start losing muscle. And that influences hormones. It influences a lot of different ways, not only your metabolism, right? We always talk about like wanting to have a robust metabolism, and women think, oh gosh, well, I'm losing muscle, I'm gaining fat, I need to restrict more calories. No, do more load-bearing activities. Even if you're doing them 2 to 3 times a week, like, you don't need to do it every day, but move heavy weight, make sure you're getting your amino acids, like, make sure you're getting protein, and then doing the things like she talked about, like just movement throughout the day. I think that's like, to me, just so valuable. You don't need to be crushing your soul in the gym. I did that for years and like destroyed my hormones. It was so bad. So I'm very careful now. And I actually think this is a great segue, because I want to ask you about about women's cycles. What is it that you do that you find has really worked for yourself or for other women when it comes to hormones? Because I think it's so delicate. Like, your hormones are strongly affected by the stress in your life, and restricting calories and over exercising are two things that will make your hormones go sideways faster than anything else. So what do you feel like is a good rhythm for women when they're looking at a 30-day cycle when it comes to nutrition and exercise?
It's a great question. I think it's like the one thing that people, a lot of people that are not in the space, it's like, oh, like you're like contradictory. 'Cause from one hand says to lift weights and lift heavy to boost metabolism. From the other, you say don't slave away at the gym. And it's the nuance, I think biohacking has a lot of nuance in it. And it's just like, yeah, that's exactly two contrary things. From one hand, we say cold plunge is great, and the sauna, you want to create hormetic stress, a good kind of stress that would help you live longer, have a stronger heart. From the other, you do too much of it, what's going to happen? You're going to create too much stress and you're going to put on weight. So it's all about the Goldilocks rule of like, what's the sweet spot? And a lot of times you will never know until you actually just pay attention to your own body. I can tell you now, like, what is usually quite normal during a female cycle. But if you have a very stressful week at work, and you didn't get much sleep and you didn't have much recovery because you maybe, like my Oura ring has been showing me that I've been recovering from a cold. Obviously, this is not the time to like push myself, even though it's day 12, I should be really crushing at the gym. So, it's totally up to me. If I feel good, I can still do it. But it's like that nuance is really important, right? Because it's like, we don't live in silo, and it's not just the cycle and just that. We have this thing, annoying thing, real life going on that has impact on our nervous system and how well we feel rested, etc., etc. But I would say one thing, like, if investing in one good session with personal trainer or watching a YouTube video, looking at someone else, I see a massive difference in myself when I work out with somebody versus me on my own. Like on my phone, my breaks are too long because my timer is not on. So my heart rate isn't, as activated, and I don't see as many results. So I would just say a lot of times you can be like wearing out your body without properly working out. And so I work out 3 times a week. But when I work out, like I work out, and it's like those 3 hours a week make a massive difference. Back in the day when I didn't have that accountability, and usually I just go with my fiance and we both like, make sure that we're like supporting each other, then I was working out 5 times a week and saw no results. So, that's again, the nuance. Like you want to just make sure that you're really on it and you know what you're doing. And that's perfectly okay to just invest in 1 or 2 sessions for someone and ask them as many questions as possible. Like that's true for biohacking business. Like hire the best people, learn from them so you can do it alone. You don't have to do everything alone. Some people have been doing it for decades, so just like, might as well use them. On that point, you have 4 stages of the cycle. So if you're experiencing PMS, missed periods, long lack of period, this is a beautiful invitation for your body to like, okay, something isn't right. And so period is a good indication of how it's your 5th vital sign, so that's really important for you to just understand. I'm like, okay, cool. Like this is one of the things that tells me how much I'm thriving or not thriving. And so at the beginning you have menstruation, and this is the time where you could potentially lift some heavier weights. I know a lot of women are tired at the beginning of the phase, but then imagine that from the first day of your menstruation, not to overwhelm you, to your ovulation, which is at day 14. So the first 2 weeks of the cycle, all you do progressively lift heavier and stronger and push yourself more. And that kind of culminates at 14 days. And then from day 14 to 28, you slowly go down with your weight. So right after ovulation, you can still lift weights, but towards day 28 is where you're like, okay, cool. Like this is, I'm doing more Pilates and prioritizing rest, et cetera,
Yep. That's really true. I can't stress it enough. Just remember the first half of your cycle, that's the time where you can really push the throttle with your body because you have estrogen on board, and estrogen can buffer stress. Progesterone hates stress. Progesterone is going to run away and hide. And then you're going to have night sweats. You're going to have cravings, and you're going to be like emotionally on a roller coaster. That's the second half of your cycle after ovulation. So just remember, if you want to drop the hammer down on, picking up the heavy weights, doing the higher box jumps, pushing some of the cardiovascular sprint work, things like that, do it in the follicular phase. That is the time where your body can actually manage a little bit more stress. Now, you don't need to pummel your body and do it day after day and be like, okay, I have to get everything done in 14 days. Like, no, it just means that you can actually push the throttle a little bit. And I love to do that. And then when I get to my luteal phase, I'm like, I don't feel like working out. I'm going to go for a walk today. I don't feel like, doing anything.
Even if you didn't have to listen to it, this is exactly how you feel. It's just the mind. I'm like, oh, I'm lazy. Yeah. Like my boyfriend's going and I really feel like not really going out. I'm already bloated. So then, but like longer walks are the best biohacks. Like it's like the number 1 weight loss hack. Like go on longer walks. This is like, I aim for 15,000 steps on like around because I just don't go to the gym and just like really longer walks, but not one super long ass walk. Cause I have one early walk. Like today we started really early with this interview, but I made sure I went for a long walk, and I'm going to have a walk, just kind of like move your body. That's way better to have 3 shorter walks than 1 long ass walk.
Oh, so good. The walks are the best. I don't know. Oh my gosh. Well, I love it. So take a long walk. That's essentially, and listen to your body. I think that goes a really long way. If you need help, get a good, cycle tracking app so you can kind of start to see, because a lot of women, if they've been on birth control or depending on like what the nature is of your cycle, you might not be that in tune with your body and not enough to be able to say like, yeah, I think I can go hard, because a lot of us have conditioned ourselves to just repeat the same things over and over and not really listen to ourselves. So until you get in a rhythm of really understanding, like I'm tired. This isn't laziness. This is just, I'm not recovered enough to be able to do this workout without feeling like I'm going to be, carried out on a stretcher. Like if you're going to be limping out, that's a sign that you shouldn't even go in. But just like we were just talking about, go for a walk. It doesn't mean you have to sit on the couch. It just means that you can move your body in different ways that feels good to you, but that isn't coming at the expense of your hormones. So I love the cycle syncing. I love talking about mindset. We really covered so many different areas here that are foundational pieces to your health. And honestly, these are foundational for anyone.
And I just want to say, like, a lot of times women feel really bad about themselves when they realize that they have PCOS or disrupted hormones. And they just said like, oh, it's not normal. Just because something is common, it's not normal. And I know a lot of people say it's like, oh, this is offensive when you say that my period's not normal. But like, I'm not saying you're not normal. Like, it's a sign from your body, like, this can be better, and the reason why you're not thriving is because everything around you mimics estrogen in your body, all the chemicals, all the store receipts, drinking from a plastic bottle instead of a glass, like all of the things little things that really, really add up. So they mimic estrogen in your body so that you can get a lot of hormonal imbalances. So usually you're told that there's something wrong with you or that you should get on birth control, and that creates even more issues. So my invitation to you is never settle when it comes to your hormones, but also understand that you're bombarded with these things. I have been working for over a year and a half on a supplement that would really support female hormones. So you take a different formula for each day. So depending on part of the cycle. So it supports each day of your cycle specifically. So it's been in the works for so long. And I asked the best formulator in the world, Sean Wells. And I'm like, can you create a formula that would support the first 5 days and then the next 6 and da-da-da. And he came back 4 months later. He says, this was the hardest thing ever. I cannot believe this. He's like, and he's created over 120 formulas. And he's like, I have never created something so complex. There's so many hormones that I had to take into consideration. The luteinizing hormone, the FSH and the glucose and the insulin and cortisol and this. And he's like, when you actually look at the graph of what's going on in your body, you'll be like, oh, fair enough. No wonder I'm not a man, There's a lot of hormones. So we think it's easy to remember like the estrogens, the outgoing one and the progesterone. But apart from the main two, there's a lot going on in your body. So even if you just whether you see it in the book or you can just Google female hormones and you see the graph, you have so much more grace towards yourself. And you realize I have so much going on with all of those chemicals disrupting my hormones. No wonder I'm not thriving.
Yeah. That's really cool about the supplement because it is true. I mean, every single day our bodies look different. If you're a female, like men's hormones, they don't cycle in a rhythm the way that we do. And every day our hormones look different, which means that we really technically should have a little bit of a different approach to how we live our life and not just cut and paste the exact same thing over and over, which many of us fall into the routine of doing. So I can't wait to see that formulation. That's going to be phenomenal. I know you're doing so much work.
I'll send you some for sure because it's really like cutting edge, and I'm not supposed to say that it looks like birth control, but we are taking different, different formulation for each part of the cycle. So yeah, I think this was much needed. And I think the future would be, you would be taking different supplements depending on which part of the cycle. Like we need to claim back the space as women and just realize we're not men. I'm not going to say the same thing every day. I'm different. What's going to work for day 12, it's not going to work for day 26. So no thanks.
So good. I say that all the time. I'm like, guys, we just can't keep doing the same thing. You have to cycle things. Like there has to be intention and thought behind it. And I think I don't know of anybody that has done that. So this is like groundbreaking territory. I feel like that you're in with this, this approach, which makes so much sense, right? If we're all individual and everything is always changing and cyclical, that we wouldn't attack our health. Like we wouldn't approach our health with the mindset that we would need something different. But I commend you for taking that on because that's huge. But I know that it's going to be so impactful for so many different women. So I'm excited to look at that formulation and give it a try. And I've loved our conversation today. Thank you so much for joining us. Many of you may know Aggie. She's just kind of everywhere and you just have such a bright and beautiful personality. It's so captivating. But for those of you that are new to her work, please tell us where people can pick up your book, where they can find you on podcast, website, all the different places, because you've got content everywhere and it's so great. And it's, I want to make sure.
Part of me is like, oh my God, is it too much? Makes me realize. But anyways, if you want to just hang, on Instagram, I'm at Aggie, Aggie, just my first name. My podcast is Biohacking Bestie. And the book is Biohack Like a Woman, which you can get on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. And we're just released an audiobook, which is so fun because you can it feels like a podcast, when you're listening to an audiobook.
I love that. I love an audiobook because you can do the long walks and you can listen. That's like my favorite. That's like the ultimate biohack right there. Is you could be listening to a book and walking at the same time, getting some sunshine, getting some movement. So hopefully that little strategy.
I feel like I think better when I move my body. So like I always have like better, like almost better presence. So it's actually, the book isn't super sciencey. So you will be able to listen to a walk and absorb all the information. So
I love that. Oh, well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. That was so fun.
This was such a great time. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us today. If you loved it, share it with a friend. Hit us up on Instagram. You can find me. You can find Aggie, the Health Institute. Leave us a note. Drop us some comments. We love hearing from you. I hope you have a blessed week, and we will see you on the next episode.